Hey guys, and welcome to the Movement Docs podcast. I'm Jake.
And I'm Mike.
And we're just two guys who want to help students and clinicians grow in the field of rehab.
Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 5 of the Movement Docs podcast. Today we got a special guest of ours, Tyler Cope. Tyler Cope is a physical therapist and athletic trainer from Raleigh, North Carolina. He received his athletic training at UNC Hill and DPT at Elon University. He currently works at Duke Sports Medicine and works in the clinic with general sports medicine / ortho population, and then does outreach athletic training duties at a local high school, as well as various club sports. Tyler's main interests lie in hazing and generally making Mike Fitzpatrick's life as difficult as he can as he acclimates to his new work site. For those who don't know, Tyler's my mentor at Duke. So I had recently just started, and they have a mentorship kind of program where, you kind of help get acclimated to all that and some hazing and that kind of stuff as well. But no, all jokes aside. But Tyler, we're really excited to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for coming on.
Tyler, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to publicly thank you for hazing Mike. You're doing God's work, and I just want you to know that.
Well, I appreciate it. I also appreciate you guys having me on the podcast too. I gotta tell you guys, I've listened to thousands of hours of podcasts on all my commutes, and so for this to be the first podcast I've ever been on is both exciting and also a little nervous too. This is great. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah. Can I start by asking you what's the best prank that you've pulled on Mike so far?
Ooh, the best prank we pulled on so far. So we've started off pretty tame. We haven't really done any hardcore pranks yet. So we want to welcome Mike with some open arms and make things pretty chill coming in. But Mike's got to stay on his toes. So that'll be TBD about pranks coming forth.
Do a little good cop, bad cop.
Yeah. He's actually a pathologic toe walker, so literally, I think you'll find that he stays on his toes quite often.
Awesome. I'll keep that in mind.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Tyler, we had a little bit of an intro from the bio here, but can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah. So I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, right down the road, and so right after high school, I went to NC State, maybe a mile away from my house, so didn't make it very far there. I was actually a communication media major to start. I want to do more production or even business stuff for TV, film, and radio. And then I had a huge pivot at that point. About 2 years in, I'm like, you know what? Kind of like sports medicine and everything it had to offer with it. So I actually went ahead and transferred to the enemy at the time, UNC Chapel Hill, and finished up my athletic training degree there and loved it. And then at the same time I decided to transfer, I also decided I want to do PT at the same time. So after UNC, I kind of worked random odd job athletic training stuff for about a year. And then I ended up going to Elon for PT school for, of course, next couple of years. And then the last few years I've been here at Duke. So it's been a good ride so far and learned a lot, but haven't moved very far. I've made it maybe 30 miles down the road, so okay. Stay pretty local. I'm trying to get all of the colleges in the area,
Okay.
NC State, Chapel Hill, Duke.
Oh.
Is there anything else inside the triangle, the research triangle there, or is does that encompass the triangle?
Those are the three pillars of the triangle right there. So usually the big rivalry, if you guys, any of the listeners aren't familiar, is UNC and Duke, obviously. But NC State also, I'm going to say this as a state fan first, so that don't tell my boss or anybody else. So NC State also has quite the rivalry as well. And UNC and Duke, being the quote-unquote big brothers, usually refer to or refuse to accept the fact that they're rivals. So it's a big thing over in this area, and it makes for a good time for basketball season.
I just want to ask this. As someone from North Carolina, and who I'm assuming is because you said the word basketball, is also a basketball fan, how does it feel to know that the University of Virginia won the national championship this year?
Oh, that one hurt deep. Are you a UVA fan?
I am a UVA alum.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, it's good for you guys. It's nice, I'm sure, to actually join the company of more
Oh.
esteemed basketball schools. So it feels nice, doesn't it? You know, congrats to you guys. Cheers to that.
Oh man.
Welcome to the club.
I know it's nice being in the winner circle for once. We probably have this same outlook on Virginia Tech. They typically beat us in football, but we have significantly more national championships in like every other sport compared to them. Other than I think like bass fishing, maybe. You have like a national title in that, but yeah.
First of all, don't knock club pro bass fishing. Club pro at the same time, but there's some strange clubs out there. So who knows? There could be some pro bass fans out there listening. So you got to be careful.
I want to formally apologize to anyone that I've offended with my bass fishing comment. The bass is a beautiful animal, significantly more majestic than any sort of trout or any other local freshwater fish that you might find, especially catfish.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. That's perfect. Well, I love it. Okay. Tower, do you have any strange habits or unusual things that you like to do that's kind of unique to you?
God. I feel like now that you've been working with us for the last couple months, you probably could be the first one to note that. I'm sure there's tons. I think one weird thing about myself is it's pollen season here in North Carolina, so everyone's sneezing everywhere. But one weird thing is I can't sneeze without coughing at the same time. It's just this horrendous achoo and cough together, and it happens all the time in clinic. And there's nothing I can do about it. I have no idea. I'm lost. But it's been there for 29 years, and I don't know how to fix it. So it's one really weird thing I got about me.
That sounds brutal. As I'm laughing about this, I don't know why.
It's rough. But other than that, I would say one habit or one really cool thing I like, I'm really into rock climbing, which is kind of considered an alternative sport, I guess, but maybe getting more mainstream as the years go by. So that's one of my unusual sports I really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are you doing like mostly like indoor stuff, bouldering? Are you actually doing like climbing on like just sheer faces with like a kit and stuff, or free climbing? And like, what do you do?
Well, have you ever seen Free Solo, the documentary?
Yes. Is that what you do? Are you him?
That's me. I'm just hanging out way up there, no rope. It's the only way to know how to live, you know?
Yeah.
No. Contrary to that film, 99.99% of climbers do not free solo. So I do most of my climbing in the gym. But when I get a good weekend, I like to go outside, and there's a couple cool crags, as they call it, a couple hours away. So Hanging Rock or Pilot Mountain. So mostly inside, being where we're at in the triangle, but definitely enjoy going outside too.
How strong is your grip?
Well, on the grip dynamometer 2 days ago, it was 75 newtons or pounds. I don't know. And I'm a little dude, so I don't know. That's like the only thing I got. So I'll hold on to that.
I'm pretty sure your grip strength is like significantly better than mine.
I don't know, man. With your stronger shirt on, and I've heard about your lifting pads, I don't know about that.
I don't know. I have like I don't know if you've seen my hands before, but it's basically like a sausage patty with like little smokies sticking out of it.
Man.
Like for reference, it's just wide. I got a lot of like thenar hypertrophy.
See that?
So it makes like gripping things very challenging.
Your hand's just a wad of muscle.
Yeah, you could say that. Grip events are not my forte.
I mean, everyone's got to start somewhere. We'll bring in the climbing world. We're pretty inclusive.
I wonder how high I could climb. I'm probably thinking like 2 feet.
I'd put you at least 8.
8?
You look like you have the determination. You can make it at least a couple more than that.
Okay. Mike, maybe we'll do that when I come down.
Yeah, because you're planning on coming down what, next weekend?
Yeah, in like 5 days.
Okay.
All right.
Perfect.
Plan set.
Let's do it.
Yeah. I'm gonna need you to dial 9 and 1 on your phone before we do this.
Just have it ready.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we won't need it. I have faith. I believe in you, Jake. That's good. There it is. Cheers to that. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, we mentioned this a little bit before, you started at this kind of media communications major and then you kind of pivoted, or there was a pivotal moment where you switched and you kind of went into PT and AT. So what was oh my gosh, you have a pivot pen. That's hilarious.
I do not endorse the Pivot Company. I just stole this pen from a career day. So.
Well, there you go. But I'm kind of curious. So like, I know we talked a little bit about this before in terms of like, you liked both of them, but what was the big like kicker to do both? Or like, what is it, like, what do you envision or how do you see using both like athletic training and physical therapy together? Like what was the thought behind that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think when I was transferring and really doing the pivot from communication to sports medicine, I really enjoyed the population of sports medicine people. I'm seeing the pivot pen back in the camera again. But I really enjoy that population of people to treat. But I also I like the idea actually of working in clinic, which most people don't. And just seeing people every half an hour. For me, being a really extroverted person, a really talkative person, I really enjoy that. And so not only that, but also just the consistency of hours that are involved in PT as opposed to traditional athletic training for like a college or pro team or even high school team or high school. It seemed to me that PT and also doing AT as well could be a good combination. And also another thing too is that I did athletic training as an undergrad degree, as did you, Mike, I think, and Jake, I'm not sure, but what was really cool about that was that you could get an actual professional degree in a skill. It's like a skill you can get paid at in undergrad. So why not? Why not get patient contact hours in undergrad? Why not, learn some hands-on stuff and actually learn applicable skills before you even get to PT school? So that's one of the big reasons why I chose athletic training for undergrad.
Mm-hmm. That's a cool background. I think it's useful. I think I'm actually kind of curious too, though, how things are going to be going in the future now, because I think everything's trying to transition into entry-level masters.
Yeah.
And so I'd be kind of curious as like, as this kind of moves forward, what we're going to see and how this like landscape of athletic training, physical therapy is going to like shape shift a little bit moving forward.
That is really fascinating, especially with the fact that now high schools, with high school football, require an athletic trainer or at least a first responder on hand. So the demand's going up for athletic trainers, but I wonder how many people are going to not choose athletic training because it's an entry-level master's degree, as opposed to choosing PT or PA or something. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's going to go. Personally, I like the idea, like I said before, of having skills and having applicable professional certifications out of undergrad, so we don't just rack up a ton of debt and then kind of go from there. So I don't know. We'll see. I'd like to think that the NATA has a good vision in mind and that it'll work out for the best, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that's with that push to master's level education is just the base AT salary. With that extra $20,000 to $60,000 that you have to go through school and potentially accruing student debt for, I mean, it's a pretty substantial amount of like additional debt to have. And then with it varies depending on the setting that you're in, but I would say on average you're probably looking at like $30,000 to $35,000 for like a starting salary for an athletic trainer, if you have a full-time gig, because we have a lot of our cohort members that can't get a full-time spot, so they're serving as like an AT2, and that doesn't really pay much at all. So they're having to work like in a clinic somewhere for part-time, and then try to work as an athletic trainer, and so it can be pretty tough.
I totally agree. Yeah, the salary compared to how much you're putting in for school if you're going to do entry-level masters. I haven't looked at the cost, what it takes to do entry-level masters for AT alone, but I'm sure the the difference is, I don't know, it would be tough. I think if I were coming in now, knowing what I know, I don't know if I would do it as just an entry level master's and then do a PT on top of that. I just don't. I think the AT PT combo hybrid is probably going to be a dying breed in coming years because of that.
Now, do you
worse?
Do you see that transitioning more into like an SCS within the PT community?
I do. And again, it comes down to what PTs are going to be allowed to do in the field. So yes, you can get your SCS, but can you, with certain concussion laws, like can you treat concussion on the field? You know, what basically logistically and legally, like what are PTs allowed to do on the field? And that's what's going to determine if PT can kind of fill that void and almost push athletic training out as a profession, or what's going to happen. So I really don't know.
And that's where it gets kind of like interesting from like a legal and practice act perspective, because you know, like an athletic trainer serving for a high school, like you're working with an MD or DO who is your medical director and signs off on your ability to do a lot of the emergency service stuff. Depending on your doc, I know we have had I think a couple of our clinical instructors in the past have been okayed for like, you know, certain like smaller joint relocations and stuff like that with their doc. But, you know, as a direct access or as a physical therapist, like, you know, does that extend with like direct access laws? Like how does, there's just like a lot of stuff that kind of gets hazy as far as what you're allowed to do, especially if you don't have the same amount of like emergency medical care that you would going through an athletic training program and like on-field hours and stuff like that.
Right.
I know with a lot of the SCS residencies, they do make sure that you get that requirement. You have your emergency medicine stuff kind of taken care of, but it's hard to say because different programs have different things. If you're going to do like an online one versus like an in-person residency, you know, what's the difference in the quality of education and the quality time that you're having on field? And I think that, you know, we've had this discussion. Mike and I have talked about this quite a bit. We've talked about it in school. I think the tendency is for people that have already have that athletic training degree is that the bias is more towards like ATCs are going to be much better at that thing because they've served in that functionality a little bit more, or at least the bias is there more towards athletic trainers. But it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future.
Yeah, I think it all just comes down to training and the drive of whatever clinician it is. So if PT decides to start having more internships where you're getting hours on field, you know, doing a emergent and acute care, then yeah, I don't see why PTs couldn't kind of evolve into that role. And I think when it comes down to the clinician, athletic trainer versus PT, it just comes down to how much they want to continue to learn and fit the role that they're working on. It's interesting. In other countries, I think the two professions are just one. So in Europe, you're a physio, or Australia, you're a physio. I don't think there is necessarily an athletic trainer versus a physical therapist. It's more of the physio is almost more of like a PT, but if you're a sports physio, you work on the field. So I don't know how that would work over here. At the end of the day, I'd like to think that we just give the best. You know, the whole goal is to keep people safe and healthy. So it sounds silly that we're kind of arguing about who can do what, because at the end of the day, like I said, we just want people to get better, right? So, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's frustrating because there's so much, like being certified in both professions. There's so much like kind of like bickering that you see back and forth because, you know, PT's trying to infringe upon what athletic training does, and PT feels like ATs are trying to infringe upon what PTs do, and then you've got like, you know, chiropractic and everything else, and everybody's fighting for what their practice rights are within a state. And sometimes it's easy to forget that, like, you know, we're all on the same team and that we should be working together versus like, you know, bickering about like who gets to do what.
Right, because I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody has an ACL tear, right, and you're an athletic trainer rehabbing them versus a PT, you're still pulling from the same literature base. You should still be pulling from the same principles. The goal is to still get them back and better. So I don't think one has a leg up over the other. It just depends on the clinician. And again, the whole legal side of things of, you know, why people are fighting so much is because at the end of the day, that's how you get paid, you know? So if you, as an athletic trainer in that profession, if the PTs can do everything you can, then you might not be as valuable anymore, right? So I don't know. It's definitely a unique, tough situation.
Which going back to like salaries and stuff, if you look at, I think it's something that potentially the profession of athletic training is kind of like done to itself. But I think part of the reason why you see that lower salary is because those are the people that want to be in those positions, and so they're willing to take, less pay or to do free internships. I mean, if you look at a lot of the GA positions, I mean, some of them you get a stipend and you get like, free tuition and stuff like that at some college placements. But at least within like the NFL, those GA positions you're lucky to get money.
Oh yeah, and it's almost necessary too to do one of those, right? So actually, in the year between undergrad and grad school for me, or actually when I was applying for grad school, I didn't know if I was actually going to get in or not to PT school, but there was a couple offers available to do the 1-year intern position in the NFL, where basically they'll take most anybody that's an AT as long as you're well enough connected, but they pay you nothing. They'll pay you $18,000 a year, but that's what you need in order to kind of break into that world. So there, and I guarantee you're working way more than 40 hours a week. You're probably working 60, 70, 80 hours, yet you're getting paid nothing. But it's just this necessary thing that people will take, because if you don't do it, guess what? You're not going to break into that world.
Oh, go ahead.
When I was with the Redskins, I mean, I saw that stuff firsthand. Our seasonal ATC intern, I mean, there were some weeks between travel and taking people to doctor's appointments and stuff like that. I mean, he was probably pulling close to 80 to 100 hours a week, in the training room or at the facility doing something, because he was the only. I mean, he was the only intern. Like different NFL organizations have different numbers of interns. So I think like I want to say like the Jets usually take like 4 or something like that, but the Redskins usually would only take 1. And so he was working a lot of hours. I mean, he became fantastic at what he did because he got a ton of experience. But to crack into that world, you're looking at doing that for 1 to 3 years and then hoping to find a spot that opens up. And I mean, that can be tough, man. You really got to be what you want to do.
Yeah, it's tough. But what can you do? Change it. That's what we have to do. No, I don't know if we can. But anyway, let's kind of go down this line just a little bit more too, and kind of talk a little bit about it. So, we're kind of in this cool position right now where we get to walk both lines a little bit. And I did want to touch on a little bit of like the rehab aspect of thing and talking about like really good care. I think it's awesome when you can collaborate with athletic trainers and physical therapists. And like, say you have a kid that has an ACL injury or something like that, you can have time in the clinic dedicated to them to do the rehabs and all that kind of stuff. But then you can adjunct it right at the high school. And so, there's, you can get like maybe 3 to 4 sessions of treatments in across the week, maybe sometimes even more, with that collaboration between both professionals, right? And so you get a really focused 30, 45 minutes in a PT clinic. And then you can also get, like some corrections of exercise and advancements and that kind of stuff in the athletic training room. Cuts down insurance costs and that kind of thing too. And also the athlete gets really awesome care. So I think it's great. I don't know. Just wanted to throw that in there.
Now, the two of you guys, like being in a position where you kind of work in both of those positions, do you get to take part in that a lot? Like, are you in high schools where you treat people in the clinic sometimes, but you also treat them like in the athletic training clinic? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so over at Duke, where Mike and I work, we have, I think, just contracts or agreements set up with a lot of the high schools, local high schools in the area. And so Mike and I would work, let's say, spring and non-football times of the year, about 30 hours a week in the clinic, and then about 10 hours a week at the high schools themselves. So with our athletes there, what we can do is if we want a more one-on-one session, just in the clinic, 30 minutes or an hour, however long it's going to be, we can schedule them in the clinic and do that. But then most days we're out of the high school in the training room, so we can work, like Mike was saying, with them just at the high school alone, which doesn't cost any insurance, no copay obviously for them. It's free, so it gives us a lot of flexibility in treating people. And let's say, for example, one of Mike's patients, that's actually happening right now, like one of Mike's patients from his high school has surgery, and then I can see him, one-on-one in the clinic, but then I know that Mike's going to be at the high school that we're associated with, so say, hey, you know what, come see me once a week, but then in the other days, go ahead and see Mike, and that way you can kind of get your, because Mike might be seeing 6 or 10 people at a time, but go ahead and do your exercises with Mike. He's going to supervise those, and then next week when you come back in, we can really take the time to individualize your care and progress you and kind of see where you're at. So it's a really cool collaborative model that we have going on, and really one of the reasons I took the job too.
So when you guys are out in the like athletic training session, are you mostly doing like predominantly more like clinical rehab type stuff there? Is that the focus before you go do like on-field stuff like on a practice day? Because I'm assuming for games and stuff, you guys are probably on field unless there's somebody in the clinic that needs like some one-on-one stuff. But is that how it rolls for you, or is it a little bit different?
Definitely. So our primary focus at the high schools is rehab and helping out the athletic trainers. So for me at the high school I work at, rehab starts about 4 o'clock.
Mhm.
And so school gets out and all the kids come in. And so I'll spend a lot of time, hour and a half or so with all the kids I can, and really focusing on that a couple days a week. And then when it comes to on-field coverage, we're more secondary. So we're just there honestly to help out the primary athletic trainers at the school. We are not the sole athletic trainers at these high schools. So in football season, we're definitely at all the games, home and away. But during the rest of the year, if there's several games going on at one time, if we have more hours we need to help out the school with them, I might cover softball and they might cover soccer at that time, or just hang out together if it's just one game. But the primary goal is really to help them out with both rehab and also facilitating the high school kids to come into Duke and kind of be that liaison there.
So when you guys are doing, like, if you have to do split coverage, like say, like you said, there's a soccer game, softball game going on, would you guys take the lower risk for injury sport? Like, is that where they would want like the staff AT to be like a high risk sport?
Well, I think we're both ATs, right? Either the outreach physical therapist is also going to be an athletic trainer as well. So it just depends on your relationship with the athletic trainer at that high school. So everyone does it a little bit differently. We don't really, at the high school I work at, we don't really think of it that way. We just, whichever one we want to cover, we do. But I'm sure other partnerships and relationships work different than that.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. I think it's great. And what you had mentioned too, Tyler, about being a facilitator is really nice. Because say you do have an athlete that comes in and they're having some shoulder instability stuff, or they took a fall and you feel like you need to get them to be seen in the clinic. We've got a really good relationship with our docs here, and so we can oftentimes make a phone call, take a look at the schedule, and see if we can get them in like the next day. And so we can find kind of holes in the schedules and all that kind of stuff, and get them an appointment and kind of facilitate that role so they get the care that they need quickly, so they're not waiting on a wait list for a while to see someone.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a win-win for everybody. So on the athletic trainer side of things, they get free help. They get us to help out the rehab and coverage. For the high school kids, they have, again, us to help out with free rehab for them at the high schools. And like Mike was saying, we can help facilitate them to get really good care, really good surgeons at their fingertips. And then from our end, we get to hang out at the high school and go to fields. So I think everybody's happy in that partnership.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean that sounds awesome.
Yeah, which is good. Okay, so we talked a little bit about kind of the outreach side of things. Kind of going along this kind of like dual life and all this kind of stuff. What does your day typically look like? And then what advice would you give to somebody who's kind of interested in pursuing this dual life?
Sure. So I guess a normal day in the life, I would wake up and I start clinical coverage at 10 o'clock. So I do, my schedule is generally 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. But I'll wake up a little earlier than that, do a workout in the morning, get everything ready for the day, prep my patients, and then I'll see people in clinic basically from a straight block from 10 or 10:30 to 3 or 3:30. So see people straight through. And then at that point in time, one of two things happens. Either I come back after lunch and then just continue till 7, or I go to the high school starting at 4 and then do rehab for the kids in the little high school clinic. And then if there's game coverage to help out with or practices that they need help with, then I'll stay afterwards till really whatever time is needed. So some days are pretty early. Some days you get off at 5 or 5:30. Other days you might get off at 8:30 or 9. So I think at the end of the day, it kind of averages out. But it makes it so it's not the same thing every day. So it's a good change of pace.
Now, if you have to work like a weekend tournament or something like that, does that reduce the clinic hours that you're in during the week, or like does that get accounted for at all?
So that's definitely a thing for us at Duke and a lot of actual hospital-based PT clinics. You have to do 10 Saturdays a year, and for most of the PTs in the Duke system, you work just a full-on Saturday, 10 of them a year. For us as athletic trainers, they do a really cool thing where we can, if we cover weekend events or club events, anything that's sanctioned by them, then that can count as time towards our 10 clinic days a year. So we've got it pretty good on the dual life end. I think a lot of other people are kind of envious of it. So definitely appreciative and gracious for that, rather than just kind of another day in clinic on the Saturday.
Which is good. Cool. I get you. Okay. So, this is something interesting, and we were talking about this probably a couple of weeks ago here, Tyler. You just recently presented, right, at North Carolina's AT conference, and we were kind of talking about different ways that athletic trainers and physical therapists and all that can kind of stay up to date on research and all this other kind of stuff. So there's a lot of interesting technology that's out there and a lot of different ways that we can use a lot of different things, and I was hoping we can get a chance to talk about that today. So we're about 2 years short of Skynet kind of taking over the world here, but until then we can probably use that technology to our advantage. So kind of the question here is, how can clinicians use technology today to kind of help us facilitate care and all that kind of stuff? What are your thoughts?
So first thing, I'm pretty sure Skynet takes over in either 23 or 2026. So we've got about 4 to 6 years left. We have more than 2.
Okay.
So we'll make sure everybody knows that, so no one's panicking. In terms of how to stay up to date with technology and using all those different avenues, it's pretty cool these days that we have so much information at our fingertips now, with the social media age and all the different platforms that are out there. I definitely think it's a good idea to kind of have that ongoing current information coming to you, but there's also a responsibility in that as well. So if you go on Instagram or you go on Twitter or several of these other things, you're going to get all kinds of opinions, all kinds of hot takes, just everything's coming at you. And so it's great. You get a lot of ideas, but at the same time, you've got to figure out kind of what's crap compared to what's actually reasonable to use. So if I had to do a percentage of things, I'd say I probably use and verbatim actually 5 to 10% of everything I see. I think to really be a good consumer of all this stuff coming out, it all comes down to your research literacy and your critical thinking. So the way I like to see it, we have all this information coming in, and our job is, or what we should be doing is letting that information challenge our current thoughts and beliefs on things. So, when you come out of school, you were taught a certain way, or maybe your clinical has taught you a certain way, but I think one great use of all the social media stuff is to sit back and say, hey, I never thought about it that way. It's actually not a bad point. Or I've been doing soft tissue or this technique or whatever, but now there's a series of people with evidence backing up saying that maybe this isn't the way to go. Mm-hmm. So sitting back and kind of sifting through that to figure out what you can add to your practice is a hard thing to do. And you can get totally sidetracked in all kinds of ways with the social media gurus and all that. So I like to have a kind of a curated stream of stuff coming in, and then and see how that challenges my viewpoints and beliefs. And if it seems pretty evidence-based, pretty sound, it can add to my more meat and potatoes kind of PT practice, then I'll probably incorporate that to an extent.
Okay. So what, I guess the question is, you said you have a few things that kind of like a curated stream, and so on. So, we talked about a couple of things already, but are there specific things that you like to use, that kind of gives you that kind of information, or that might be useful for somebody that's listening in?
Yeah, definitely. One of my favorite ones right now is it's a app and website called Read by QXMD. And what it is it's kind of it's a feed of research articles that comes out. And so you can follow any journal you really want to. And if you have institutional access, then you'll have full text to all the articles that come out. So for example, as a sports PT, I'll subscribe to BJSM, AJSM, JOSPT, probably 5 or 6 different ones that are really sound in the area that I work in. So every day on my phone, I'll pop up with any new article that comes from those various journals, which is really cool. The other thing you can do on the same app is you can put in keywords. So let's say I work with concussion patients, so I'll put in concussion as a keyword, and any article that comes out with concussion immediately pops up into my feed. Now, I mostly just scan the abstracts, to be honest, but it kind of keeps you up to date with what's happening, what's going on, and you can share. You can actually have a shared collection between other clinicians that you can email or save things in the shared collection. So I think there's a lot of great uses for it, and that's one of the main things I use. The other two I put in that curated stream. I definitely use Twitter. Now Twitter it's madness out there. There's all kinds of trolls and crazy hot takes and just everything. But that's you take that with a grain of salt for sure. It's more entertaining than anything. But there's some good information there too. There's definitely some guys and girls like to follow on there. So and I think Instagram is kind of similar. There's not as much discussion, it seems, but there's a lot of cool information that's popped out there. I don't follow Instagram as much, but I think that's where things are heading. It's where the cool kids do these days. And then the last thing is I listen to a lot of podcasts, like similar to yours. I've definitely listened to quite a few episodes. You guys put out a lot of good information. I listen to several others like Physioedge, Physio Matters, and a host of other ones as well. So I think those 3 areas are 3 of the big ones that I use to get information across, and it makes for good discussion points and other things to add to my practice.
Mm-hmm. I love the what you're talking about by QXMD, and we'll make sure we put all this stuff in the show notes too for anybody that's interested. But that kind of collaborative approach where you can save a collection of different articles that are really pertinent to everything that you're studying and that kind of stuff, I think is great. Because if you had a group of clinicians, and I know Tyler, we talked about this, but if you had everybody kind of looking at different information and said, oh, this article, it's got some really good information, sound evidence, I think this would benefit everybody else to read it as well. You can put it right in that folder, and then everyone has access to it, or at least has access to the title, which is just great, ultimately, because then you're talking about research and sharing it and that kind of thing.
Right. I look at it as it's a way to kind of break down the silo mindset we have in the sports medicine world. You get a lot of people that just practice one way, and that's if they don't tune in anything and they don't have anybody else around, that's probably all they're going to do for their whole career. And so by having an actual steady stream of current information, it's like tuning into ESPN for sports. You don't just follow, you don't just look at the New York Giants standings or the New York Giants season from 3 years ago. It's the only thing about football. You're kind of just following everything that's happening. And even though you're not a Saints fan per se, you still kind of have an idea of what's going on. And I see a lot of the social media stuff is kind of the analogous thing to tuning into a sports network or tuning into a news network. So obviously you don't take everything, any take Stephen A. Smith does about your favorite basketball team does not mean that that's the gospel right there, but it's but just everything that comes out from all the different stations kind of keep you up to date with what's going on.
Are there any Instagram pages or Twitter pages that you recommend, ones that you like?
Yeah,
so you mentioned the podcast. So I was just curious with the other forms of social media.
Sure. So with Twitter, my Twitter handle is @ortho_hub, and and if you look at my follower list, I have 150 on there, and there's a lot of really good ones. I'm sorry, my following list, like a couple hundred actually, but there's a lot of good ones. I like both Peter and Kieran O'Sullivan are great. There's there's so many. Although I'm blanking on a lot of them. I'm happy if anybody emails me. I'm happy to give them a list of really entertaining people to follow. Anybody from like the more inflammatory Adam Meekins to more sound, more research based kind of clinicians out there. So a lot of good people out there.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. Well, it makes sense. I think it's good in a way to have that kind of information sent to you, because in a world that is very busy and can be very hectic, and when you have life things going on, that darn life just keeps getting in the way, right? It's nice to have things that are it's just nice to have things that are streamlined and sent to you. If it takes 2 seconds to look at a notification on your phone and say, oh, new article's out about concussions. Okay, well, this would be good for me to read, or so on and so forth, rather than having to spend a ton of time to actively search, which I feel like if you do have the time and that's what you want to do to kind of improve your practice, you can do that too. But it is nice to have that streamlined, to have things kind of coming to you when you have everything else kind of going on in your life.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Can dig it. Let's talk about some live stuff. So
here we go.
Yeah. So
everybody can now tune out now. This is a good closing moment. So before you get, some bad advice, it's been nice knowing everybody.
I'm like really, really interested now. Like, I mean, I've been interested this whole time, but I'm like exponentially more interested because of how you just segued that. I want to know what's about to come.
Oh, see, it's how you hook in the listeners,
Oh, that's perfect. Well, let's talk about this. We always talk about like personal growth and failure and all these kinds of things. And this is a quote that I really like from Tim Ferriss's book, Tribe of Mentors. But how has a failure or an apparent failure set you up for later success? Do you have a favorite failure of yours?
Good question. And Tim Ferriss, actually, podcast I've tuned into quite a bit as well. So he asks really good questions. So if anybody hasn't checked out his podcast, I'd recommend it. Favorite failure? I can't think of any particular. I mean, there's lots of failures, but no one particular one that comes to mind. I'll say the biggest thing is that just the idea of failure and being okay with it is something that early on in my life, in my career, I certainly was not okay with that. And I've realized how important failure is to personal growth and development. So, for example, I think early on you fight so hard to just control everything you can, and I think if you're not okay with failure, then you're assuming everything's always going to work out. So it's almost like an entitled kind of mindset to have. Whereas if you truly just give it your all, and if your heart's in the right place, your mind's in the right place, something inevitably will not go right, then at that point in time, rather than just being upset with the fact that there was a failure, just take it as an opportunity to learn from it and grow. So, because every single time that you fail, it's like this, sympathetic response, fight or flight kind of thing, and that you take it upon yourself really hard. That's more, and Mike and I've talked about this, it's more of a fixed or defensive mindset as opposed to a growth mindset, So, not that you want to fail all the time, but just you have two options when you do not get the result that you want. You can either be upset about it, or you can take it for what it is and try to grow with it, because that's all you have control over.
I hear you on that, and that's something that's been kind of a good point for me anyway personally, is just taking like those things, like especially as a new grad coming out of the box, like you're thinking to yourself like, okay, I have all these sets of skills and I'm going to make a huge difference and going to make all these not going to mess up, everything's going to be great, and then inevitably you do mess up and things are not great sometimes, and you have to be okay with that. And like you said, I love what you said there, take that point as an opportunity to learn from it and kind of grow. You have control over how you react to the situation, maybe not necessarily the situation, because you only can do with what you know at the time.
Right. It's kind of what some people define as emotional intelligence. So something happens, and at that point in time, how your attitude on that and your next discourse of actions is going to depend on how emotionally intelligent you are to make the best of that situation. Do you go into a blame mode where you're saying, it couldn't have been me, I don't want to be wrong. What excuse can I make? What can I blame this on? Or do you take responsibility for that and say, okay, this is what has happened, whether it's your fault or not, this is what's going on, and what is the next best thing that you can do? Because that's all you have control over. What's the next thing?
So here's kind of like an offshoot question on that. And because obviously, I feel like Mike and I tend to be pretty introspective, and we always overanalyze everything that we did and try to see did we do something right? How could we have improved the situation? But I wonder how much because what you kind of described there, your emotional intelligence or being kind of cerebral in how you choose to respond to situations, right? That's something that we also kind of want to see in our patients too, because a lot of times if you have a flare up, people will go, oh my God, I'm in pain again. And then just everything shuts down and mentally they start going to this negative kind of cognitive spiral. And everything is just increased exponentially because they have that emotional response to it. And so I know that that's personally, that's something I try to, encourage and reassure people and say, just because you have a flare up, it doesn't mean that you're getting worse. And think about the things that you can do to affect the situation. But do you see or do you notice a corollary between a clinician having that type of mindset and how the patient responds? Do you think that's something that we can try to help foster in people? If you tend to be more of an introspective or reflection, or I guess more of an emotionally intelligent, I don't really know what I'm saying, but
no, I think I'm following you. So if inevitably we're going to have patients that will have flare-ups, that unfortunate things will happen. Maybe they'll re-injure themselves. They're a high school player that re-tears their ACL, or it's one of your middle-aged patients that has a flare-up of fibromyalgia or tendinopathy or something like that. I think patients can absolutely read the emotions that the clinician is showing. So if somebody had a flare-up or something went wrong, and now the clinician is kind of defensive and or just stressed or worried about that, guess what? The patient is probably going to take that on as well. And if you know anything about pain, pain is basically a threat response. So you're escalating. If what you're showing is potential threat, well, they're definitely going to take that on. And so that whole threat level is going to rise and probably going to make the whole situation worse. So I think, kind of to your point a little bit, can you actually be calm about it and walk them through that process and say, okay, we've had a setback in the sense of you aren't feeling well, or maybe you've done too much activity, more than your body was ready to handle or the tissue was able to tolerate. So that's happened, but what can we do about that now, and kind of help foster that skill in them, so when that situation happens again, once they're discharged, as soon as something happens, it's not, oh my God, everything's wrong again. Oh my God, I ruined something. It's no, I probably just, my cup overfilled a little bit. Maybe I just did a couple extra miles. Really, if I just scale back and underload, just put out the fire, things will probably be okay, And so I definitely try to encourage patients to have that skill and to work on that skill. It's something that you can always work on lifelong too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Nice. I'm trying to add a follow up to that follow up, and I can't formulate it in my head. We're just gonna keep
use your words, Mike.
I'm trying.
Mike, I want you to think about what you're saying. No, I'm kidding.
I guess the question is, we talked about, I like the cup analogy that you just mentioned, but what other kind of strategies or things do you employ for somebody that's coming in that's freaking out about the fact that they, are in a lot more pain and they kind of had a flare up, we talked about that load management kind of thing, but are there any other things that you tend to go to or things that you tend to say that kind of helps calm that down? I know we've talked about staying even keel and that kind of thing, but what other strategies do you tend to use for somebody that's like that?
This past year, I took a CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy course, for this very reason, to see what other strategies I can implement in that. I know the research is kind of hit or miss for some CBT stuff, but really it's just more the way that you talk to people, and using some of the skills I found anecdotally is pretty helpful. So in the CBT mindset, when somebody has something going on, whether it's a problem, pain, whatever it might be, you break that down into 4 different things. And this is something that you have to really develop your question asking skills to do. So let's say that I don't know, you're a really hardcore runner, you're training for a marathon, and you've been kind of battling this posterior tib tendinopathy. I'm just making up a situation, and all of a sudden, something went awry. You had a bit of a flare up there. So when they come in, rather than just saying, oh crap, we need to, or you tell them like you need to do this or do that, rather than just telling them what they need to do, ask them one of these 4 kind of domain questions. So figure out with the feeling they have of that setback, what's their actual feeling about it? What kind of behaviors are they doing when they're in that situation? What is their thought processes in that situation? And then, so we have behavioral, what behaviors, and then what emotions do you have on there as well. So really anything that goes on, you can tease that out in people and say, okay, when I'm having pain, my feeling is that I'm, things are going to continue to go bad. My emotion is that I'm upset, like this pain is making me upset. My behavior is that I am kind of withdrawing from all of my other exercises, and so I like to ask them a lot of reflective questions and kind of figure out, where their head's at with that. And a lot of times when you tease things out like that, people feel a lot better. It's like a kind of a therapy session for them to talk out what's going on. And so if you just tell them what they need to do, then anytime that they have pain in the future, well, guess who they're going to go to? They're not going to go inward. They're going to have to come back to you for that. So they get that therapist dependence that I don't think you really want. Whereas if you can kind of get them more in tune with how they're actually, what they feel in that situation or what they do in that situation, I think that's pretty powerful.
Awesome.
I completely agree with you, man. That's some real deep stuff right there.
Yeah, it's something all of us can do, and you can do it with yourself as well. So let's say I don't know, maybe you're working with somebody post-operatively as a therapist, and it's a complicated post-op thing. Maybe it doesn't have to be, but you maybe overlook something. Maybe you didn't follow a precaution perfectly well, or maybe that patient didn't do what you wanted them to do, and they told the doctor that, well, Mike told me that I was supposed to do that, And as soon as you get in one of these really emotionally charged situations, first thing is like de-escalate and step back and ask yourself, like, okay, what am I feeling? Is my heart rate coming up? What's my breathing like in that situation? Why does it make me feel that way? What am I doing? Am I present, or am I just, my head's about trying to put out the fire, trying to stop the failure from going on, So that's something I like to do, to have to take the time and kind of work myself through a lot of those questions to ask yourself.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you find that that's a skill that can be kind of like trained and improved upon? So like when you ask yourself those questions, you get better and better at answering them over time?
Absolutely. No, for sure. And that's a lifelong thing. When you first start off, it kind of also incorporates mindfulness in that a bit, and that's definitely a lifelong skill of being able to, find yourself present there and be able to bring yourself back, rein it in, and then actually be able to use those self questions to improve yourself on. It's not easy. It's, when you're ruminating on something, it seems like it's like, how in the world can I still be my best version of myself for treating all my patients that are coming up after that, because you might still be thinking about that situation from earlier. So, so I think it's a skill that we'll just keep working on, and, you can work with other people with as well and see what works for some people and what works for others, and sharing's helpful too.
Cool. I can dig it. Kind of along that same kind of vein, I'm looking at the sheet over here, and I think this is kind of applicable too. So, we talk about different investments that you made or kind of like worthwhile things, and that kind of stuff. What would you say is like one of your best worthwhile investments that you've ever made? I think it's applicable.
Yeah, that's a good Tim Ferriss question right there.
Yeah.
It's always one of his go-tos. I think one of the best investments, not materialistic in a way, but you've got to invest within yourself. And what I mean by that is, if you really prioritize the things that make you function at your best, then you're much better at answering those self questions. You're much better at handling situations. So, if I've been stressed out or I'm deep into a project or studying for exam, scale back and think, how is my sleep? Am I actually sleeping a reasonable amount? How's my exercise? Am I doing all the things that make a human organism go? Like sleep, exercise, hydration. What else? We have being social and being around people that you appreciate and enjoy. How much of that are you getting? And if the answer is your sleep's kind of shit and you're not eating well, you're not exercising, well, guess what? Your brain's definitely not functioning as well as it could be. So start with that. Make sure that is always prioritized, and then from there, then you can start tackling some of those other things in life. But I definitely think focusing on that, investing in that is huge for personal development and for just career success.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I like to think of those things as kind of like the low-hanging fruit, right? Mm-hmm. So, if you get this foundation of stuff, if you get your sleep right, like you said, you get the exercise in, you get the water and all that kind of stuff in, the socialization, like you get those like basic human needs taken care of, then you have such a stronger foundation to build off to give yourself, give your best self and put your best foot forward. But I think we get caught up a lot in trying to do too many things or trying to go for like the, I don't know, overreaching ourselves in such ways. But if we can just get those basic kind of human needs taken care of first, then everything else springboards off of that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked a lot about a bunch of different things, a variety of different topics here, but this is another Tim Ferriss question I love. We love getting people's perspective on this kind of stuff. But
if you haven't read the book Tribe of Mentors,
do it.
Most of the questions that Mike has pulled from there are from that book.
Hey, don't reinvent the wheel,
No.
Don't reinvent the wheel.
And it's cool too, because when we ask these similar types of questions, like everybody responds to them differently and everybody goes about it a different way. And I think that's the coolest thing about doing podcasts in this regard and just like interviewing people, because everybody inevitably comes from a different backgrounds and everybody inevitably is going to problem solve differently with their unique experiences and everything else. And so it's kind of fun having, these similar types of questions, because you get to see these different thought processes from each unique individual. So it's, kind of fun. But yeah, so nice, the heart emoji. That's perfect. Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of poignant for people who are, on the cusp of graduation and all this kind of stuff, let's say. But what advice would you give to a smart, driven college student about to enter the real world? And what advice should they ignore? What are your thoughts?
What advice would I give them? I would say just soak up everything around. Everybody, like you guys were saying, comes from a different perspective and has different bits of advice. So I think we're pretty fortunate at our clinic that we have over 30 different PTs. So, being able to,
a lot of people.
It's a lot of PTs, a lot of personalities, a lot of PTs all in one place. So that's what makes it great. So definitely staying open, and you can listen to somebody, you can be best friends with them, you can do everything without having necessarily do what they would do, or just because they tell you something doesn't mean that you have to go by it. So I tell Mike all this stuff all the time, but he doesn't have to do any of this stuff. He's like probably saying a lot of crazy things, and you're like, I don't know about that. But hey, you know what? It's another perspective. So, so I think just being a sponge is huge. Bad advice, it kind of goes back to the whole failure thing, but feeling the need to be perfect all the time. Definitely don't need to do that. Just accept the fact that, hey, it's the way it goes, just give it your all and kind of go from there. So I think sometimes people get a little too hung up on reputation or too hung up on, is this person going to like me? Is the surgeon going to like me? Is, if I mess this up, what's going to happen? But Just if you're honest and you're open, you communicate about things, especially as surgeons or other PTs, they understand. They're more than welcome to. They're more than happy to help you out. So stay open, communicate well, and things should go pretty well.
Love it. So we talk a lot about this kind of stuff on a lot of the different episodes, but reading we tend to like a lot. Are there books or things that you're reading right now that has been very impactful for you? And if so, what are those books that have been good for you, or that you'd be willing to kind of share for anybody else that's listening?
Yeah, so I've been reading several books at the same time right now, and I'm doing maybe like at a snail's pace, 5 pages here, 5 pages there. So I'm just in this eternal circle of trying to finish 5 books at one time. It's a ridiculous chore, but probably next year I'll finish them all, and I'll let you know. But so a couple that I'm reading right now, whether it's audiobook or paper, I just finished. Sorry for swearing, but The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is wonderful.
Such a good book. By far the one book that I consistently share with people on Audible all the time.
Great.
Fantastic book.
Yeah, I was not let down. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So for people who are in the, just go kind of mindset and personalities, like a lot of us PTs are, I definitely recommend it. Another one I'm reading right now, and this one's not necessarily a personal development book, but more of a psychology type of thing, it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And the idea behind that one is it's about trauma and how trauma affects us somatically. And so it talks a lot about people who, and I'm very early in the book, but people that had either PTSD or just subtle trauma things, so something happened when you grew up, could be trivial seeming, but a lot of things that happen to us early in life manifest in different physical ways, and it just starts to shape the way that we think about things and the way that we do things. So it's almost like people can adopt this learned helplessness. And you've probably seen a lot of your patients before that when they get in a situation of pain or anything else like that, they kind of revert back to certain, probably a lot of times negative or unhelpful thought patterns, or they experience it in really unfortunate ways. So it's just a really interesting book so far. I definitely would recommend it too, especially if you work a lot with the chronic or persistent pain population. And just really, as PTs, we should be pretty well versed in pain. So I would certainly recommend that one too.
Nice. That's great. We'll make sure we put links down in the show notes too for anybody that's interested. I kind of have to echo that too. The Subtle Art book is phenomenal. Listened to that on audiobook when I was driving back from Arizona, actually, and just was really blown away by a lot of the realizations that this guy has had. Just the story when he's in Cape Town and he's kind of sitting on the edge of the world, essentially, looking at his own existence and kind of putting things into perspective. I try to remember that sometimes when I'm stressed out about trivial things. So it's a nice thing to kind of and like you said, kind of take the kind of sympathetic response out of it and kind of step back for a second. It's that kind of picture that kind of helps me get back to that point. But yeah, we'll definitely make sure that we put that stuff in the show notes for anybody that's interested in following up with that.
I really like that one too, because one of the big discussions in it is challenging what your metrics are for things like success, and a lot of the ideas of it's okay to be mediocre, and why are we so afraid to just accept mediocrity?
Yeah.
And if everyone is inherently special and deserves everything, how is any one person special? So there's a lot of interesting little things like that, but I really like the idea of reframing what your metrics are.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're thinking about coming out of school, it's I'm gonna be the best therapist. I'm gonna fix everybody. Everybody's gonna be healed. Nobody's gonna not get better. And then when you come out, you realize that life is, in therapy is gray. There's a lot of other things that go on, and there are some people that you work with that may get worse on while they're under your care, or they may not have a positive experience. And so changing that metric of I'm going to be the best and everyone's going to get 100% better to maybe something like I'm going to have positive interactions with my patients, or changing what that metric is for your vision of success or what it means to be a good therapist, I think is really good.
Yeah, it talks about valuing again more judging yourself more on your values than it is upon outcomes. So did you let's say one of your values is honesty. Like, did you if you were absolutely honest, then you can kind of judge yourself in a way that was that's fantastic. Like, you can live with that. But if you judge yourself based upon your ACL re-tear rate, well, guess what? Your self-worth and self-value is derived from things outside your control, and that's a really slippery slope to go down. So put things, find out what your values are, and those are things that are always within your control. And I think you'll get, the book suggests, and I've come to find out as well, that you can definitely garner a lot more happiness just by loving the process and loving, working towards your values than it is somebody else's outcome, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because they talk a lot about not caring about like the grind and the hard stuff, right? That like you only have so many like things that you can invest your time in. Like, you have a finite amount of, for lack of a better term, fucks to give.
Yeah.
Sorry, Grandma. And so you have to figure out, like, what are the things that are important to you, and how do you invest your time and your meaning? How do you give things meaning in your life? And so figuring out how to like do that and still be able to set kind of like lofty goals, but the things that you're not caring about are the stupid, trivial things that are, that would normally like set you back or get you hung up on, and just kind of embracing the process so that you can ultimately become a better version of yourself. I don't know. I love that book so much. I listen to it on Audible all the time.
Jake, I'm gonna that one. That's an all-timer for me, no doubt. It actually reminds me of another book. It ties in well. They're definitely not the same thing, but there's a book called The One Thing. I think Angela Duckworth. No, she wrote Grit, but it's called The One Thing. Have you guys read that one?
It's on my wish list, but I haven't read it.
I am Audible in Grit right now, and that is a good book too.
Okay. I haven't read or listened to Grit yet. That's also on my list. But The One Thing kind of ties in well, actually, with the Subtle Art book, because it talks about finding, if there's just one thing in life that you enjoy. Let's say it's I don't know, you really, what you feel passionate about, what you feel is your calling. That everything that you do, because again, you have finite amount of fucks that you can give, so you might as well, everything that you do in your day should be prioritized around working towards that thing. And that might not be a very, I don't know, tangible, like award-based thing, but so when on a given day you say, what is the one thing that I can do in order to get me closer towards this? I think that keeps things in perspective a bunch, and if you tie it into your values, like from, again, the book we were just talking about, I think it really simplifies life quite a bit. And I say this as somebody who, anybody at work will agree with this, that I seem to take a ton of projects here and there, and just am all over the place as a human. So I think I can do everything and do it well, and it's just not the case. And so finding out what I actually truly am passionate about, and kind of putting my F's there, and not about having to have the best at everything. It's just, and I'm prone to that. It's one of my tendencies, not a strength for sure, but again, it's something I'm working towards, and I think it's not just me. I'm sure a lot of people in life could say the same.
Definitely. I'm guilty of that too. So I hear you on that, my friend.
Mike, that kind of reminds me of Atomic Habits a little bit. Just as far as like, because I think there's a point in there where he said, Tyler, have you read Atomic Habits, or are you familiar with it?
That's actually next queued up on my thing. So
nice.
Before I'm starting to listen to Atomic Habits. So it's funny, we have like these 5 books. Yeah. All of them are like literally on. I actually signed up for Audible by accident, and so I thought it was my Amazon Prime subscription. So it's just been I've been getting charged monthly the last couple months for it, and before I finally realized it, so now I have all these credits built up, and the Subtle Art book and Atomic Habits and Grit are all on there right now.
Nice.
So, no, I haven't read or listened to it yet.
Atomic Habits, and like it's not like a spoiler or anything, but there's just he kind of had mentioned something, when you were talking about the one thing, there's a couple points in there where he kind of poses the question like, if you're trying to be successful at something, you can kind of frame it as, would a successful person in this area do this? Like, would a successful rock climber do this thing? Would a successful power lifter do this thing? Would a successful physical therapist do this thing? And it's almost like if you watch The Office, where Dwight's like, before I do anything, I ask myself, would an idiot do that? And then if the answer is yes, I don't do that thing. It's basically that, but it's in like more of the context of habit formation or propelling you toward a goal.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of reminded me of that. But Atomic Habits is another really good one.
Nice.
Yeah.
On the list for sure. Probably tomorrow we'll start on it. So I'll get back to you guys on that. I feel like we need a book club. I mean, this podcast is awesome, but maybe we just need to form a little book club going on, because we got the same books in mind here. So, and I do actually want to branch out from personal development books too. Certainly I do like fiction and other things, so maybe I need to step back a little bit as well. But those are all great books.
Have you read Watchmen?
No. You mean like the comic book Watchmen?
Mm-hmm.
I have not. Although Mike and I saw, there's no spoilers, don't worry. No spoilers. Mike and I did see Endgame last night.
I also saw Endgame last night.
Okay, just give me I'm not going to answer mine because I think you're even more excited than me, but give me a 0 out of 10. 10 being it was the most powerful, like you cried, it was phenomenal movie, and 0 is like After Earth with Will Smith and Jaden Smith. That's 0.
Oh, wow.
Where are we at in there?
I'd probably give it like a mild like 12.
Okay. Now, also another 0 to 10. 0 to 10, how much of a Marvel fan are you? Because I think that determines the first score a little bit more.
Probably like a 14 to 17.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, like with any Marvel movie, there was some things that I liked and didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought I felt completed leaving the movie theater.
Yeah.
In several ways.
I'll say this. I thought it did a phenomenal job for Marvel fans that have gone through, 22 films of tying up loose ends, a lot of callbacks, a lot of fan service. It was quite emotional. So it was a good film overall. We can chat off air about some more thoughts on everything. But overall, if you're a Marvel fan, go out and see it. You'll enjoy it.
What's your 0 to 10?
Oh boy, you really want to know? So
I'll say this. 4?
So I'm like a 6 out of 10 Marvel fan first.
Okay.
Of all. So that I watch the movies. I am not diehard. I will not watch it like one of our colleagues' husbands is going to watch it 5 times this weekend. I'm not that level. But I would say I would put it similar to my ranking as a Marvel fan. Like I'd say it's like a 6 or 7 because I thought it did well for the Marvel universe, but as a standalone film, I mean it was okay. I liked Infinity War better. I'll put it that way. And I don't want this to be a downer because I'm sure everybody in the world loved the movie. So go out and enjoy it. Don't listen to me. It's actually great, but I would take Infinity War over this one for the simple fact it was a little bit more gripping and you didn't know what was going to happen in Infinity War. This one felt a little bit more predictable, but the trade-off was that for the predictability you got closure, so that's how I put it.
Well, fair enough.
Mike?
0 to 10. Mike.
So for Marvel fan, I'm probably 11 out of 10. Which I think is what I said yesterday too. Yeah, 11. But as far as the movie goes, like I really liked it, but again, there were some things that I didn't. I probably would give it like a 7. There is, from what you guys had mentioned already, some good things that I thought were really nice. The fan service stuff was really cool. The last hour of the movie was pretty good. I won't go into detail. But there were some things that I didn't quite like as much either. So I don't know. I'll give it a solid 7.
Fair enough. All right, guys. I know we're derailing, so I'm gonna just give you one last derail thing, and I'll let Mike bring it back like he so skillfully does. Tonight, for any listener that's tuning in, this is April 28th, which is a Sunday, which means that the Game of Thrones episode 3 is coming out for this current season, which is super hyped. So I know, Mike, you're behind in the episodes, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Like 4.
But Jake, you are caught up, I assume.
Yes.
Okay.
Very much
Now,
so.
are you as hyped as I am? Because I'm at 15 out of 10 hyped right now. This is gonna be. Great.
I'm very hyped because this is supposed to be more like intense than the Battle of the Bastards was.
Well, and remember, don't spoil anything because one of your co-hosts has been living underneath a rock and hasn't been caught up yet. So.
Oh, that's true. Well, he doesn't even know what that means then.
That's true. That's true.
This is true. You said that, and I was like, I don't know
Mike,
what that is.
spoiler alert: Ned Stark dies.
What?
Spoiler alert:
No!
Brandon
Throw the
pushed out of
microphone.
window.
Oh gosh. I would flip this laptop, but I
Mike,
can't.
where even are you in the show right now?
Okay. So the last thing that
are you like episodes behind or like seasons behind?
seasons behind. The last thing that I remember was Peter Baelish kicking the Aaron Queen out of the moon door.
Oh, that's a real power move. Yeah.
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 I don't even. How is that like
I don't know.
3 seasons back? 2 seasons? Where is that?
That's probably season 5, I want to say, or season 4 or 5.
Okay.
Those two.
Okay. That's the last thing I remember. So
Well,
it's
Mike,
been-
you have homework. Stop reading books and go watch Game of Thrones.
I know. What am I doing?
Mike, I mean, if you dedicated the same amount of time to like current pop culture TV shows that you do to self growth, I think you would be caught up on Game of Thrones.
Probably. I got some homework to do.
Shame.
Shame. Ugh.
Another Game of Thrones reference, which he doesn't know, but keep going.
Oh, Mike.
How do you talk to your patients, Mike? I mean, this is the majority of what I talk about people. You know, if you're caught up on pop culture, just shooting the blank with people. Come on.
I talk a lot about food. Food works.
Mike, I think Mike's like stuck in '94. It's like the Third Eye Blind self-titled album, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Like,
whoa.
I mean,
yeah, it's still there.
Third Eye Blind reference. I like it.
we had one episode where I think I named somehow worked all of the song titles into a question and or a response.
You did. It was with Carrie.
Yeah,
I think
That's
it was
frightening, Jake.
So, yeah, it was amazing. And it's funny too, because Carrie's fiance now, which is pretty awesome. Brad, I went to high school with. I'm really good friends with Brad, and Brad and I have always been huge Third Eye Blind fans. And so when Jake was going on this montage of all of the Third Eye Blind songs in the form of a question, like Jeopardy, Brad was in the background just like dying. So I don't know if you could hear him laughing or anything like that, but he was like giddy with excitement as Jake kept going on and on about all these different Third Eye Blind songs.
I am face palming right now, but I'm also at the same time I'm kind of proud of you guys. That's impressive. So very good.
Dedication to a craft, my friend.
That's right. That's Jake's one thing. Third Eye Blind.
Well, I don't know if it's Third Eye Blind. It's just like overly dedicated to really bad jokes.
You're doing well.
Like I am in like a book club with a couple people from Clinical Athlete, and we were talking about we were reading a book, Other Minds, and so the premise is that I think he's a philosopher who's like also really big into scuba diving. And so he's obsessed with this like octopus colony like off the coast of Australia, and just like goes down there, and he like goes into this whole discussion of like what it means to be like conscious and the development of the nervous system and stuff from like a somewhat philosophical but also somewhat like scientific like point of view. And somehow that turned into a joke about me body tempering an octopus. Long story. And so I made some joke about it, and they questioned my dedication. And so I ended up buying a small Cthulhu plushie.
Nice.
And then proceeded to take it in the gym with me and use a very large piece of steel to release all of its adhesions.
Oh my god.
Nice.
I'm glad you're able to get those adhesions out. Nice work.
Yeah, I mean, you can just see how limber it is now. Like it flows. It's soft and plush and.
So this is Mike's cue right here.
Yeah, there it is.
I don't know.
So-
You should have stopped me 10 minutes ago.
No, it was too magical. It was good. Rabbit holes, as is normal on this show. But yeah, let's bring it all back together. We talk about like questions that we like to repeat on the show, and there's one that we've consistently repeated I think for every episode that we've done, which is pretty awesome. So buckle up. So we here at the Movement Docs believe in always moving forward in all that you do. So based on all of your previous experience and knowledge in life and love and the pursuit of happiness, what is one piece of advice that you'd give to anyone listening to the show to help them be the best versions of themselves? What do you got, Tyler?
All right. So I was prepped for this question ahead of time. So there's a quote that I really enjoy, and it kind of ties in everything we've been talking about. And the quote goes as such that we cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have, and that is our attitude. And I am convinced that life is 10% of what happens to me and 90% of how I react. And that quote's been going on a long time, but I think it sums up a lot of what we've been talking about today. So definitely you have control of your attitude, and you've always got that. So stay positive, enjoy life, and kick some butt.
I love it. Tyler, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on our show. If anyone's listening to this show that wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way that they can do that?
So you can email me at tyler.cope@duke.edu or get at me on the Twitter at ortho_hub. Happy to get back to anybody there. And I appreciate you guys having me on the show. This was a great first podcast, and hopefully you guys will have me back in the future. So yeah, appreciate it.
Awesome. That's perfect. Well, thanks again for tuning in this week where we spoke with Tyler Cope, PT, DPT, LAT, ATC. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or have a topic that you'd like us to discuss, shoot us an email at tmdmovementdocs@gmail.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
Spoiler alert for Avengers Endgame, guys. Things happen.